All right, greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here, or Adams Van Sale, here to shine a light on the goings on down south. And tonight I'm going to be shining a light on some ideas or asymmetric defense strategies for communities and individuals here from the southern tip of Africa. And I hope you guys learn something. These stream of consciousness, as I call them, or rather discussion streams, part of the Stream of Consciousness live series, I often use to flesh out some half-baked ideas, discuss them, take audience questions, take audience input, and your inputs and questions and testing of some of these ideas actually help me refine them so that I eventually can turn it into an opinion piece or an article for a publication. A notable example of where I did this was the opinion piece that I wrote for the European Conservative called Africa, No Continent for Utopian Ideas. That piece started off as a stream like this, where we were talking or discussing about some ideas, and then I could condense them and refine them into a piece. As always, if there's something wrong with the audio is not loud enough, there's some weird noise or anything, just let me know. I'm not a tech expert when it comes to these things. I appreciate the feedback, but if I'm coming through loud and clear, I think we can begin. As I said, your inputs are very valuable in these types of discussions. They're valuable when I interview guests as well, but particularly here, it helps me order my thoughts and to take half-baked ideas and to bake them a bit further, to keep them in the intellectual oven a bit longer, and then you get something a bit more clear. I see there's already some people in the chat. Goeienaand, Rick in Kuala. Lekker om julle te sien. Nice to see you here. And tonight, as I said, we're discussing asymmetric defense strategies for communities and individuals. And this is based on a question that I often encounter when discussing the various decentralized solutions being pioneered here in South Africa, and particularly by Afrikaners. Solutions like, for example, AfriForum, the organization that I work for, that I'm involved in. Also the solidarity movement, projects like Orania. Often you get this question of, but what if a powerful threat comes to smash or take away what you have built, often in the form of the state? Or the question of like, but what, this is all fine and good until the day that the state takes notice, and then it's all over. What's your plan then? Often from Americans, there seems to be, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory sense, there seems to be a very deep trauma and in that regard when it comes to the state seeing something that it doesn't agree with or doesn't like, or something that it challenges its power, and then it's just completely smashed. And therefore a lot of Americans ask that question, but it's not just exclusively Americans that ask this question. All right. As I said, if there's seeing as I don't have a guest, I have no other feedback except your own in the live chat. So if you have any questions or things that you want to point out, flaws in my arguments, things that are not clear, let it make it known, and I will engage with that. Also, if there's something's wrong with my audio or visual, anything, let me know, and I'll get on that. Koala says Waco, Ruby Ridge. Well, a lot of examples come to mind almost immediately. All right. So let's start off with that question. But what if a powerful threat comes? That's a nice project or little solution that you've built there. Would be a shame if the state were to notice it and come smash it or confiscate it. Well, what are you going to do about it when that happens is the question. And the short answer is, well, then you defend it. And as Flip Base, the chairperson of the solidarity movement, often says, a much greater risk than trying is doing nothing. With the latter, defeat is certain. So, I mean, that's often a quote that I use in that regard. Hallo Dian, vra wat is AfriForum se planne vir aksie SA Action planne vir Action SA en EFF se staatsgreep. Dian, ek wil baie graag jou antwoord, maar dit gaan nou nie lekker inpas by vanaand se stroom nie, so ek gaan ongelukkig daai vraag stuur vir my. Ek sal vir jou in detail antwoord. Stuur vir my 'n e-pos na ernst.vanzyl. Jy sal nou sien hoe om dit te spel as jy onseker is onder op die skerm. So jy stuur dit na ernst.vanzyl@afriforum.co.za, dan sal ek jou antwoord. Soos ek sê, die enigste rede hoekom ek nie antwoord nie is dit pas net nie lekker by vanaand se onderwerp nie, en ek wil juist fokus op vanaand se onderwerp. Maar baie dankie vir jou vraag. Chris sê hi, and Peter Swart says our obedience to laws is what saves us. The majority of the solutions Afrikaners come up with are well within the law. Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of the successful solutions, what AfriForum is pioneering, Solidarity Movement, Orania, is the fact that they are designed and built in such a way that even the most meticulous, malicious bureaucrat can't find anything wrong with them, that where the law is being broken or anything illegal is being done or nothing is being done that justifies stopping, destroying or confiscating or obliterating them. So that's a very, very important point that you're making there, Peter. So an important lesson as well is whenever you want to build something, parallelism, any type of alternative center of power, don't be sloppy when it comes to making extra double sure that you're not painting a target on your back or giving your opponent an excuse to attack you or to destroy or damage what you're building. Chris Ernst het op YouTube afgekom met ons rigting aanrit, nog niks gehoor nie. Ek is nie 100% seker wat jy van praat nie, Chris, soos ek weer eens sê. Stuur vir my 'n e-pos. Die e-posadres kan jy op my YouTube kanaal ook kry, dan sal ek bietjie daarna kyk. Alright. So, history is filled with case studies where smaller forces held their own or even beat far larger or more powerful opponents against all odds. Asymmetric defense strategies. The quintessential example of an asymmetric victory is that of the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BC. Some of the most well-known modern examples also include the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War and both the Soviet and American military experience in Afghanistan. Even if you restrict your view only to South Africa as a source of examples, the examples are plentiful. The Battle of Blood River, 1838, during the Great Trek by the Voortrekkers. The defense of the Basuto's mountain stronghold of Tababoshu, almost like Tabanshu, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's Tabanshu is another place, but it's I've only read about this history, so excuse my wrongful pronunciation, which it almost certainly is. Let me just put it in the chat so you can see how it is spelt. My first instinct would be to pronounce it like Tabanshu, but it's not the same place, so I'm not sure. All right. And then also, and the Boers' heroic resistance in the Second Anglo-Boer War, 1899 to 1902, just to name a few. So I'm going to be focusing on these close to home examples here in South Africa. You can name some examples in the chat as well. And if you're watching and it's no longer live, you can name some examples in the comment section as well. So let's start off with the Battle of Blood River as our first case study of asymmetric defense. So Battle of Blood River, 1838, 468 well-organized Voortrekkers were able to withstand an onslaught from a force of between 25,000 to 30,000 Zulu warriors without suffering a single casualty, without disregarding the significance of the vow to God taken by the Voortrekkers on that day. The role of their resilient, impenetrable thornbush reinforced oxwagon lager, or circle of wagons, strategically unorthodox but effective defensive position next to a river, as well as strong leadership combined with astute strategy, cannot be overlooked. So from what I've read, you can correct me if I'm wrong, why I'm saying unorthodox, strategically unorthodox but effective defensive position next to a river. I've read that actually it wasn't the orthodox at the time strategy to go with your back against a river or to circle your wagons next to a river. I can't explain why. I have to go into read a bit more. But that was for some reason the Voortrekkers has decided that would be strategically the best, even though it wasn't common at the time, as I understand it from what I've read. Let me just put that. So that's because that's going to be the next case study that I talk about. Like I said, Taba Bosho is a steep rocky plateau which forms a natural fortress. It was used by King Moshoeshoe I, founding father of the Basotho nation here in South Africa, to successfully defend his people against attacks during the Mfecane and the Difekane wars between 1810 and 1840. So the Mfecane was a massive genocide that was perpetuated by oh man, I didn't get that note here. Let me just quickly get that. Because like I said, I'm working off some notes that I made. I didn't put a lot of detail in there. So the Mfecane was a time of wars and migrations in Southern Africa in the early 1800s. People involved belong mainly to the Zulu and other Nguni groups. And Mfecane means destruction or the crushing in isiZulu. In the Sotho languages, in the Sotho language, the events were known as the Difekane, which means forced migration. So it's a forced, almost like an ethnic cleansing by the Zulu nation, and during the early 1800s of many of the smaller tribes, including what is today the Basotho. Yeah, that's that Tabanshu. Yes, I've visited there, but I don't think that's why I said it's not the same place as far as I'm aware. Tabanshu is close to the Lesotho border. But I don't think it's the same. This is how it's spelled, the other one. So I'm not sure exactly that Bosiu, how that is in Sesotho, how you would be pronouncing that. Dion says the Battle of Amayuba is also a good example of an asymmetric victory. Absolutely, you can go read up on that on your own time in the Anglo-Boer War, and then also. Stefan said when I was talking about the unorthodox to circle the wagons next to a river, Stefan says, I guess that it's unorthodox because you're fighting then with your back against the wall, so to speak. I think so. And it limits your movement. So you can't, for example, if push comes to shove and you have to move back, you kind of, as you said, you're up against a river. So maybe that is. But like I said, I'll have to read up a bit more on exactly why that was unorthodox. Dion says General De La Rey during the Anglo-Boer Wars use of trenches at the foot of hills was also innovation for warfare at that time. Yes, and the mass use of trenches in the Anglo-Boer War actually set the stage for the most famous use of trench warfare in the First World War, only a few years later. Peter Swart says, in school sports, I was taught not to question the referee when I felt he was unfair. It was a sense of motivation to then try to win, even when playing against 16 players. Yes, absolutely. Peter Swart also says it's in Afrikaner blood to go up against a seemingly impenetrable force and find ways to defeat it. Out of the box thinking, unorthodox guerrilla warfare against the Brits, for example, and also just plain old stubbornness. You're like, well, people will tell you like, no, this is not the way. And then the Afrikaners were just like, well, we're going this way. We're just going to brute force our way. It's almost, I mean, it's not that deep of a psychological analysis, but it's almost like the tactics of Dricus du Plessis in the UFC, where his style is just baffling to so many other martial artists, because he just, when he gets backed into a corner, he just brute forces his way to victory. Very, very, very typically Afrikaner approach there to combat. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. All right, so to get back to Taba Boshoe as the Basotho example of asymmetric defense. Also, this steep rocky plateau fortress was also used very effectively to defend against British and Boer opponents between 1852 and 1866. Thanks to the defensive resilience of the strategic stronghold against existential threats, the Basotho nation was birthed. So their ethnogenesis happened within this this context. So so their ethnogenesis happened within the context of this mountain fortress that defended them against opponents from different sides and different directions. Let's see. Chris says a lot of those tactics were used in Angola as well. And you're probably talking about the Bush War, the South African Bush War, not the Rhodesian Bush War. Kingdom of Vinland says, Conscious Caracal, interestingly, Ukraine isn't the only recent example of trench warfare. There was also the Iran-Iraq War, which was basically World War One, but with Cold War technology. Fascinating example. Thank you very much. All right. Let's move on. Like I said, I'm making notes here on the side because your inputs also help me form these thoughts a little bit better. So I'm not sitting here giving you like this in-depth, perfectly constructed argument. I'm putting some thoughts out there, getting your feedback, and that helps me order my thoughts myself. So the third example is the Second Anglo-Boer War, famously characterized by novel Boer guerrilla warfare tactics, which included groundbreaking modern trench warfare strategies, as mentioned by the chat earlier, is an excellent example of the principle of asymmetric warfare. As retired US Navy officer and former SEAL Jocko Willink observed, in his words, imagine importing an army with more soldiers than your opponent has people and still taking 3 years to finish the job. That's a fantastic quote. It comes from 2 episodes that Jocko Willink did on his podcast where he does an analysis of the Anglo-Boer War. Fascinating analysis. You can just type in on YouTube Jocko Willink Anglo-Boer War and you'll get the 2 episodes. I think I'm not going to guess what the episode numbers are, but you'll get the 2 episodes. Very, very, very good. Slight criticism from my side would be that he buys into a little bit too much of the anti-Boer British propaganda at the time, framing the war as like this liberation effort of the Boers were oppressing people, therefore the valiant British Empire came in to save the day, and that was the driving force. He kind of wholeheartedly just eats up that propaganda. But I mean, it's not a war that a lot of people take a deep dive into. And also the Boer side of things, the Boer version of the war is mostly in Afrikaans. So I mean, that's a little bit our fault as well. So, I mean, the British version of events in the war and motivations of like what the different players were motivated by is almost like the commonplace version because it's in English, and the Boer version of events and motivations is pretty much ignored because it's firstly behind a language wall, and that which is translated is not popular in England and in the Anglosphere. Let's just put it that way. Fascinating war to get to dig into and read up on. It has gotten a lot of attention in recent years, but it deserves so much more. It's such a fascinating conflict. Tragic one, should not be romanticized in the sense of it was tragic loss of human life, devastating effect on the Boer, destruction of the Boer republics, devastating effect through the concentration camps. More women and children died on the Boer side than both soldiers on both sides combined. Horrible statistic, but still a fascinating war to dig into if you're a history buff. Chris says, yes, Adams, did you know that the caracal is the emblem mascot of my old unit, 7 SAI Palaborva? I did not know that. Fascinating. Very cool. If we're including trenches, we should wait, let me just put that on screen. Kingdom of Vinland says if we're including trenches, we should probably also have World War I stormtrooper trench raiding tactics. Well, I have no knowledge of that. Can't really comment there. Let's see. Warren Grant says, hey man, you should mention the Scandinavian Corps. The Corps task, the Corps task were mainly sabotage operations, but they also took part in the siege of Mafeking and the battles of Magersfontein and Paardeberg. Fascinating. I also don't know that history. I'll have to go check that out. Let's see here. Dion Veldhuizen says, I'm going to translate on the fly. The Great Trek was a great example of a smart and innovating way of rebellion to begin against the British government without violence. Wow, that's an interesting take. Grant says he made that comment because his wife is related to this group. Fascinating. Let's see here. Chris Elder says 7th South African Infantry Battalion, Palaborwa. I think I've seen it. It's I have actually seen your patch, the Caracal patch. Very, very cool. Rick Hearn says drones are taking people out in trenches these days. Well, drones are definitely also a classic example of modern asymmetric warfare, I think, and people on motorcycles, another one. There's a great piece on IM 1776, the international publication, on exactly that. But yeah. So all three of these examples that I've used demonstrate key insights into asymmetric defense strategies. Firstly, you must use the available terrain. Okay, so here's the lessons. Lesson 1, you must use the available terrain to your advantage. In the world of politics and community-based solutions, utilizing the existing political and demographic landscape of your time and place is critical. So let's just go over that again. You must use the available terrain to your advantage. In the world of politics and community-based solutions, utilizing the existing political and demographic landscape of your time and place is critical. When state capacity is dwindling, as it is in South Africa, make sure you are able to fill that vacuum. When your community is demographically dispersed, incorporate concentration facilitation into your strategy. When your people live in high concentrations, it's much easier to create a reality. And I wrote a piece for IM 1776 on exactly this strategy of demographic concentration that's being used in South Africa by Afrikaners. And you can find that piece if you just search the reintegration of the South African order, and you'll find that's the title of the piece. Second lesson in asymmetric warfare, or asymmetric defense strategies, I should rather say, you must become adaptable to the changing environment and systematically improve your resilience. Just like the Voortrekkers used their ox wagons, the Boers used trenches, and the Basotho used the mountain to create resilient, defendable positions, we must use the most suitable environment, tools, and tactics at our disposal in our time to achieve the same result. The establishment and growth of neighborhood watches and farm patrols, the trimming and removing of overgrown bushes and grass in your neighborhood, using power multiplying technology such as drones, acquiring a firearm and training regularly, establishing effective communication networks, and building new institutions are all ways in which we can bolster our resilience and establish defendable positions. And that's also a theme of a piece that I wrote for IM 1776. The piece is called A Time to Dig Trenches. And if you just search A Time to Dig Trenches, Adams van Zyl, you'll find that piece as well. I elaborate a bit more on that idea. Let's see here. Kingdom of Vinland says the SADF was quite innovative with the pattern 83 chest rig being basically the first modern chest rig. Chris Ayler says, we had 2 caracal pets I looked after during basic training. Beautiful animals, 85 to 87. Gilgamesh van Urik says, you talk a lot about warfare and very little about intelligence. I think that infiltration and or sabotage by foreign and domestic intelligence services might be a more likely threat today. I mean, yes, in theory, but at the same time, you can either bog yourself down with just being worried about being subverted by intelligence services or some foreign intelligence organization or malicious intel, whatever organizations. the people that get fixated on that threat, even though it's not a ridiculous threat, there is some historical precedence to that in South Africa and abroad. I feel an overfixation on it, just from what I can see, causes complete paralysis. Like, people get completely paralyzed. They're like, I can't organize in any way because the intelligence organizations will infiltrate, subvert, sabotage, destroy. All right. Well, then you've already just self-sabotaged yourself. You just subverted yourself without them doing anything. So, I mean, if I was a intelligence, what do you call it? Intelligence organization. Is that the right word? Intelligence intelligence agency. All I would do is focus a lot of resources in blowing up my reputation so large that people are afraid to even try anything, because my agency will come and subvert and destroy them. Not saying that doesn't happen. It's just that's a very cheap and effective way. That's what I would do if I was the head of that type of organization or agency. I would just pour a lot of resources into psychologically just creating this massive psychological threat about don't try anything or else. It works like a charm. So yeah, then you're already subverted. Like I said, I mean, I'm not shooting down your comment as if it's ridiculous. I think it's just overfixation on that threat and risk just paralyzes people completely, and then whoever wants to subvert you doesn't really have to do anything. You're doing everything yourself. Peter Schwartz says, during the Battle of Isandlwana, the Zulus used their knowledge of the terrain and surprise tactics to overwhelm the British, who were poorly positioned. Know your battlefield and study the enemy. Very, very good lesson there. Let's see here. Dion, again, I'll translate on the fly, says the Boers started the commando system to stop farm murders and attacks on the eastern border or the eastern front. AfriForum Neighborhood Watches is built on the same type of model. Well, farm patrols, yes, Neighborhood Watches as well. Organizing your community, very quick responses, as effective of a communication network as possible, where if you're in trouble, you call all the nearest allies and they show up on your farm immediately if there's any trouble. That's the best strategy, especially in a country where often the police will not show up or show up a few hours later just to do a report. Let's see. Okay. Where was I? All right. Third lesson in asymmetric defense strategies is a well-organized minority is much more capable to stand up against a more powerful or larger opponent. So a well-organized minority always beats a disorganized majority. You can take that to the bank. It's such a consistent pattern all across history, all across the world. A well-organized minority usually beats a disorganized majority. There is strength in cooperation and community, and disorganization and dispersal makes defeat a definite. Even an action as simple as obtaining the contact details of your neighbor in case of an emergency is already a form of organization, of networking. Okay, just making notes here, as I said. Joining an AfriForum branch in your area to tackle its unique problems as a team is an even better form of mobilization. Nature provides us with an abundance of examples of effective asymmetric defense strategies, which allow smaller animals not only to survive, but to thrive in hostile environments. That's why I used the eystervark, the porcupine versus leopard as the thumbnail. Credit for the photo in the description. The best three local examples in South Africa are the porcupine, honey badger, and versamelvoëls, sociable weavers. So even though the Kruger National Park, our largest nature reserve, has numerous powerful predators, some of the most powerful in the world, it simultaneously has an abundance of porcupines and badgers. The porcupine defense strategy is having hundreds of sharp, hard quills that can seriously injure, blind, or even kill predators that dare to try and eat it. I've seen many cases of porcupine quills killing dogs in South Africa, even killing lions and leopards, one piercing their windpipe, blinding them, causing such bad infection and pain that they die of that. The honey badger's secret is a thick skin, which can withstand some of the worst assaults predators can throw at it. Observe how a honey badger survives an attack by 3 leopards, or how 2 badgers fend off 6 lionesses. You can just search on YouTube yourself, badger versus lionesses, or badger versus leopards, or porcupine versus leopard, and you'll find all these amazing videos on YouTube showing that, demonstrating that principle. All right. Next, even though sociable weaver birds, the third example from Southern Africa, are tiny and fragile, they have managed to survive in the Kalahari Desert. Their survival mechanism, let me just make a note here, to survive and even thrive in the Kalahari Desert. Their survival mechanism, which allows them to prosper, let's actually, because I use prosper there, so it's fine. Their survival mechanism, which allows them to prosper, is determined organization and demographic concentration. Sociable weavers, so you can just Google sociable weavers, or as Afrikaners, versamelvoëls, and you just see their nest, sociable weaver nest. And it's just massive, massive nests that they build collectively. Sociable weavers collectively build massive nests high up in trees, or in modern times on top of telephone poles. An individual atomized weaver would certainly perish in between the Red Desert dunes, but a well-organized community which builds resilient natural lagers to keep them safe flourishes. The power and effectiveness of deterrence is applicable and evident on a communal and individual scale. I'll just say that again. The power and effectiveness of deterrence is applicable and evident on a communal and individual scale. And a lot of these examples that I gave demonstrate that. Chris also says, even the meerkat, relentless fighting spirit. Absolutely. Ratel rof, ratel taai, dit was my rugby span se kreet op skool. So Dion says, badger tough was the slogan of his rugby team in school. Rick Hearn says, distance is a defense mechanism. Yes, in many cases. I mean, Orania demonstrates that. They literally trekked into the desert to create their community. All right. Both a literal desert and a demographic desert. All right. Criminals target the houses with the least visible security. Predators prefer the prey that is the least trouble to catch and that can deal the least damage to them. Criminals, predators, and malicious governments favor the path of least resistance. That's why the ANC in South Africa is obsessed with the balance of forces formula. So the balance of forces formula is whereby the actions you take and the policies you pursue are determined by the amount of resistance you will encounter. In order to deter, and if necessary resist, the myriad of predatory forces we face, we need to take lessons from history as well as nature about successful asymmetric defense tactics. When you have a thick skin like a honey badger, not even Afrikanized killer bees, as the Americans call them, or honeybees, as we call them in Africa, can stop you from also tasting sweet success. That's the end of my writing so far. Still a lot of polishing there to be done. Also need to decide who I'm going to be sending this piece to, what publication. Still thinking about it. Yeah, if you have any suggestions, put them in the chat. I'd really appreciate it. All right. There's also this story, the story I once heard of a guy, whether it's true or not, it's not really important. It's the principle that counts, of a guy that gets cornered in an alleyway by a whole big group of thugs, and he's going to die. They're like, they pretty much are threatening him with death. And then he says, all right, fine. You can try, you'll probably be successful, but just know for sure, I'm going to make sure if you try to kill me, one of you is going to lose their eyes in the process. And none of the thugs were willing to make that gamble, take that gamble. So they left him alone, which is again deterrence in an asymmetric situation. Debbie says, so we need to be like honey badgers and not like rhinos. A very well written piece. Well, the thing about rhinos is they also have a very thick skin. Unfortunately, humans are their biggest threat. Dion says, News 24, a lot of people read it. News 24 is behind a paywall. I really don't like the idea of writing something that I'm writing it to give people some insights. I'm not writing it for my own ego or to make money. So I'd rather not be writing it. Thanks for the suggestion, Dion. Bye, Donkey. But I'm going to be focusing on always submitting wherever I can my pieces of writing to places with that are not behind a paywall, so that as many people can benefit from it. Because that's what I want to do with this. That's why I'm doing the stream as well. As I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it just to like make money. I'm not making money out of this. My channel's not even monetized. Just to share my thoughts, hear your thoughts, hear your questions, get your inputs. Helps me refine what I'm writing. Peter Schwartz says Yuri Bezmenov warned the US against psychological subversion, which is the method of undermining and manipulating the thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors of individuals or groups to destabilize and control. Yes, I've seen that clip. Peter says we constantly fall into that trap of listening to the propaganda of the enemy, accepting their ideas. Yes. Dion says Marula Media is the best option. In Afrikaans, definitely. I translate all of my pieces of writing, or rather, let's be 100% accurate. I translate about 90% of my writing. Sometimes there's either maybe I don't have time, maybe the piece isn't really applicable to an Afrikaans audience, which most are that I write. But I try to translate all of my pieces, and then I send them to Marula Media. I will probably also send. I also in the future will be sending some to the MP van Wyk Lou Centrum, project by Academia, and also to the Vryheidsstichting, which I'm a board member of. Sideline Opinion says, greetings from the Swartland. Goeienaand. My home where I grew up. All right. Well, also, like I said, there's also another piece that I'm currently writing. It's actually done. I just need to decide where I'm going to be submitting it. It's on Afrikaner identity, particularly the nexus between Africa and the West. Fascinating topic. So I'll be keeping you up to date on when that's coming out as well. And this stream, the content of this stream, I will be turning into an opinion piece. Like I said, I will be submitting it to probably an international publication, but also once it's already published internationally, I will send the idea to some local publications, whether they want to republish it as well. Politics Web as well. It's a fantastic platform that I'll probably send it to as well. All right. Yeah, a nice little short discussion stream here tonight. I'm not going to be keeping you here artificially. I don't have like a quota of I have to talk 1 hour. Usually the show is 1 hour, but that's usually also when I have a guest. So this brings us to the end of tonight's episode of Stream of Consciousness. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're almost at 200 episodes. Very, very nice milestone coming up. Well, Dion says the Afrikaners can be described as the orphans of the West, which would not be inaccurate. That's a very, very creative label. Chris Eiler says, I'll send that link to you. So, like I said, my email is out there, ernst.vanzyl@AfriForum, or let me say, I'm not going to say the first half in Afrikaans and second half in English. That defeats the purpose. ernst.vanzyl@afriforum.co.za. Send me an email. I'll definitely get back to you. Thank you very much for tuning in, Debbie. Rick says, sal maar tussen die noemnoems rondkruip. Peter says, goeienaand. All right. Like I said, that brings us to the end. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. Thank you for your comments and your questions. If you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, subscribe if you want to be kept up to date. Also join my Telegram channel. There's a link in the description to join that as well. If you're watching and it's no longer live, you can still be part of the conversation and give your thoughts and also questions in the comments section. I read all of them. And thank you very much for everyone's participation here tonight. I will keep you up to date when these thoughts that we discussed here tonight are going to be condensed into a piece that I will be sending to a publication. But thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I hope you'll have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, and I'll see you again next week. Cheers, guys. Have a good one, and God bless.